Everyone, my name is Naomi. I use a power wheelchair and I work in disability rights, and I'm very passionate about this topic as well. I've been on the MAC since the beginning of the year. I'll pass it to Lizzie.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Lizzie Reagan. I'm a DC resident. I identify as a person with a disability myself, and have been serving on the committee for a few months now. And I will pass it to Zach.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Zach Smith. I am with the District Department of Transportation, the Equity and Inclusion Division, and I will pass it to my colleague, Kim Vaca.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Vaca. I'm a transportation planner at DDOT, and I manage our Streetery program. And I'll pass it off to Christine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Mayer. I'm the Associate Director for Multimodal Safety Engineering with DDOT, here to support Kim and answer any questions about the engineering side of the guidelines.
Perfect.
Sorry, and I'll pass it on to who hasn't gone yet. Let's see, Adrian.
Hey, I'm Adrian. I'm a volunteer. I just got involved because of issues that I've seen with the motorized vehicles, like things like mopeds and scooters and bikes and things of that nature on the streets. And me as a person with a disability, with visual and physical things that I deal with, just seems very unsafe. And so I just wanted to kind of join and see if I can make a difference in regard to that regard, or anything else that I, hear that I could help with or be of assistance with. I don't know who hasn't went yet. Let me see, the P and the N. Who is that?
I'll just go. Hi, I'm Susie McFadden Resburn with the DC Office of Disability Rights, and I am the ADA Compliance Specialist for Public Works.
Perfect. And if you can pass it on to someone else, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Peter.
Hey everyone, Peter Stefan. I'm working with Susie, and just here for a moment, so I just wanted to catch up with Karthik and say hi, and thanks for having me. I'm the attorney advisor for ODR. I'll pass it to Naomi.
And actually, perfect. So Peter, while you're here, can you just give a quick plug for the Olmsted plan?
Yeah, we just had our last third and final town hall on October 1st at the Arc in Southeast. It was on October 1st, but we still welcome comments and feedback on the plan. We have a first draft on our website, odr.dc.gov, and the Olmsted plan, just for anyone who doesn't know, I feel like I've made people sick with how much I've talked about it. I apologize, but it's just a plan the district has to include people with disabilities as much as possible and improve on that as much as possible. So we are, asking for any public input or feedback on what we can do to improve that plan. The final version will be done by the end of this year for the next 3 years. So yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks, Peter. Has anyone else not gone? I think Ashton is our last.
I might be the last one. My name is Ashton. I live in Ward 6. I don't have a disability myself, but I have loved ones with disabilities, so I'm here as hopefully an ally, and here to learn as much as I advocate. So thanks for letting me join. And I'll be off camera because I'm cooking dinner and you don't need to see that whole mess. But thank you for having the space.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashton. So I think we can just go ahead and get started. Actually, just take a quick peek at the agenda together. So today we went through introductions. So we'll start with streeteries. Then I wanted to go ahead and ratify the daylighting letter that's been circulated. Talk a little bit about the capital projects that Zach has started to send data our way, and we can take a look at that and start making a plan. And then also talk a little bit about scooter comments, that are due by October 15th, and then open discussion. Naomi has something that an experience that she'd like to discuss, and then we can have open discussion as well. So yeah, anything. So before we get started with our DDOT friends, any alterations to the agenda? Anything that folks want to add or subtract from the agenda? Okay, great. So we will then take it over. So Kim, it's all yours, and Christine.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen if that's possible. Let's see.
To share your screen, there's a set of icons in the middle. There's the hand icon, and right to the left of the hand icon, you'll see people.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Okay, so y'all should start to see my presentation.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So, hi everybody. My name is Kim Vaca. I, as mentioned, am a transportation planner at the District Department of Transportation, and I manage our Streetery program. I've been with the agency since February of 2020, and very quickly into my tenure here, we drafted the temporary program and are now shifting into creating a permanent Streetery program. And we've presented to this board before when we were drafting the guidelines around 2 years ago. And so I wanted to come back now that we have a proposed guidelines and present to you in more detail. We'll talk about just like the program, what is a streetery, since there is a lot of confusion about that, design requirements, the permit process, and then fees. There is a lot in this presentation as I am doing. You are the first group of many groups that I'll be going to. So this is a catch-all presentation, but I will maybe skip around to some points to focus more in depth. And then if we want to go back and talk about any other pieces of this, I'm happy to discuss in more depth. So starting kind of at the top, streeteries meet many of DDOT's goals. One most notably are the goals identified in MAACDC, our long-range transportation plan. Generally, this program seeks to improve walkability and pedestrian amenities by increasing the people-focused use of public space and creating more car-free areas, essentially. And there's two kind of like major buckets of this program that are hoping to achieve this MAACDC goal, which is our placemaking benefits and then the economic benefits. The placemaking, we're adding more eyes on the street. There's more people using public space. They're out of their cars. They're sitting adjacent to the sidewalk. This increases then the vibrancy and active uses along our mixed-use commercial corridors in the city. And then it's also just a more efficient use of public space. You can either have one car that's privately stored in a parking space or potentially 7 people dining there. The other benefits are just like increasing the resiliency of the food industry, which is a very tough industry to be in, but this adds a bit more sustainability, economic sustainability to that group, increases their business revenue and seating capacity. So just from like the business standpoint, those are the benefits to those businesses. But then that results in more tax dollars to the city. Also allows for the retention and expansion of staff who work at those restaurants as they're able to hire more people and keep them on. So those are some of the takeaways that we've learned through this program and working with the food establishments that have participated. So how have we gotten to where we are today? This goes back, as I mentioned, to 2020 to COVID. In COVID, the mayor had a task force that was put together rapidly in March 2020 that sought to address and mitigate a lot of the impacts of the pandemic. One of the recommendations was to allow food establishments to expand into public space, since there were many indoor dining restrictions that were taking place. And so we very quickly adopted guidelines that were meant to facilitate that specific task and use. And then the next year, when businesses started to winterize or create more formal structures in public space, we had to then adopt guidelines to then sort of hopefully craft and rein in those very creative structures that we started to see in public space. Overall, we were polling restaurants and the communities, residents, community organizations to get their thoughts on this program, as it was kind of an unintentional pilot of this concept. And overall, there was strong support for continuing this program in the long term. We had over 300 streeteries. Right now, it's brought back to about 290. And so we've since then been crafting guidelines and regulations to support a permanent program. Back in 2021, we started outreach to the Restaurant Association and to BIDS to get their feedback on what a permanent program would look like. And then in 2022, we put out a draft guidelines, early draft to this group and to others, including the Restaurant Association, et cetera, to hear feedback of what does this look like for you? What are some concerns that you have? And from this group in particular, we heard a lot of concerns about what was happening on the sidewalk, access into these spaces, and accessible and safe design. So we took all of that feedback, revised the guidelines even further, and then for the past essentially year and a half have been going through the official legal review of creating new rules in the DCMR and then drafting new revised guidelines. So now we're here presenting to you what those guidelines are as proposed. And we are the Public Space Committee will be presenting to them on November 14th at a special hearing. You all are very much encouraged to attend and give your thoughts on what I'm about to walk through. And this today is meant to just kind of give a more in-depth presentation of what you'll be able to find on our website. So some issues that we've seen across the city, regardless of neighborhood: inadequate drainage and stormwater flow from existing designs. Most, I would say, of the streeteries that you see in public space were built without permits from either DDOT or DOB. They received money, built what they could in haste, and so what we're seeing out in public space is usually not safe nor accessible, and our guidelines are hoping to revisit that. So these are some pictures of the issues. I'm sure many of you are keenly attuned to these, but stormwater flow, obstructions to our infrastructure, from crosswalks to transit or traffic signals and other important infrastructure that we use to get around, non-compliance with the American Disabilities Act, whether that's the type of seating that's provided or access into the space, walls above 42 inches, which are creating visibility issues, vacant or underutilized spaces or inefficient placement. Again, this temporary program was created in haste. It was free. It was processed administratively. And so when you're given something for free, you might not be using it to the best of its ability. So our guidelines are hoping to transform these types of temporary structures and streeteries into something that is safer, more accessible, and more aesthetically pleasing to all users of public space. So we took the aesthetic and safety needs, we took food industry needs, and we took community needs and put them all together. And the guidelines that I'm about to walk through, we view as a compromise and hopefully a solution, a win-win for the various different stakeholder groups that use streeteries, operate streeteries, or even just walk by or bike by streeteries on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So diving into the actual meat and potatoes of this, what is a streetery? A streetery is a word combination between street and eatery. These are designated areas in the roadway or an alley used specifically for outdoor dining. Streeteries are not sidewalk cafes, so they're not located on the sidewalk. There was a quick moment in the temporary program where we were facilitating temporary sidewalk cafes. Those were sunsetted and expired in May of 2023. So all of those issues on the sidewalk are now regulated fully by our sidewalk cafe program, not our streetery program. And then also streeteries are not located on private property. So that's fully regulated by the Department of Buildings, not by DDOT, as we only regulate public space. Something that's very important for the sidewalk cafe program, but also for streeteries, is that we maintain clear pedestrian pathways on the sidewalk. And that was something we saw being obstructed pretty heavily when we were allowing temporary sidewalk cafes as part of the temporary program. So if you still see issues like that today, please send in a 311 request to reach out to DDOT's Public Space Inspections Division so that they can send an inspector out and enforce those issues. Now, there's various different types of streeteries, not only being just like roadway streeteries or alley streeteries, but where those are located in those spaces. So we have basically streeteries that can be within parking lanes, whether that's adjacent to one business or multiple. Travel lanes that could result in maybe the occupation of one travel lane or potentially a full road closure for a streetery. And we only have a few of those, most notably in DuPont Circle next to like Kramer's or where the farmers market is. And then, of course, alleys as well. Only food establishments are able to apply. We got a lot of interest from general retailers or other commercial users of public space to have a streetery, and only food establishments will be able to operate a streetery as it is only for outdoor dining. So the list of food establishments includes restaurants, distilleries, breweries, wineries, grocery stores, fast food establishments, prepared food shops, and kind of what might seem random, but are theaters. And that is because our sidewalk cafe program is used by these groups. And so we wanted to make sure our streetery program aligned with those same users. These are just more in-depth explanations for where exactly within a parking lane we would allow a streetery. So it's not just every parking lane that can have a streetery. There are restrictions. So it's streets that are 30 miles per hour or less, metered parking spaces, RPP spaces directly adjacent to a business. We see that a lot on corners where a business or restaurants are at a corner and maybe they might be next to RPP parking. And so they're eligible to occupy just those spaces next to their business with a letter of support from the ANC. And sidewalk extensions. And what we mean by that are areas that we've expanded the sidewalk into the road, like on 17th Street, where if you're familiar in 17th Street Northwest in DuPont, we have the sidewalk, then a sidewalk expansion area, and then a protected bike lane. And so that area that's between the sidewalk and the protected bike lane is eligible for a streetery. Areas that are not eligible, freeways and interstates, of course, rush hour restricted locations, ADA on street, parking meter spaces, loading zones, bus stop pads, pickup drop-off zones, or what we're now calling short-term parking, capital bike share stations, micromobility corrals, in parking spaces not directly adjacent to a curb. And that would mean like if there's a sidewalk and then a bike lane and then a parking space. We do not want streeteries on the other side of a bike lane so that you're having to walk across a bike lane to get to that adjacent restaurant. And then on utility vaults. So those are general prohibited locations that are not allowed. However, there are these larger streeteries called travel lane streeteries that community organizations like a BID or a Main Street can apply for that may involve relocating curb functionalities like loading zones or maybe even a bus stop potentially that basically require these groups to look at the entire curb functionality for that block, determine if things should be relocated or added or subtracted, and then figuring out if where streeteries should go within that whole block. So these larger travel lane streeteries are only allowed where streets have 75% or more of their ground floor uses as commercial, and streets that are 25% or 25 miles per hour or more. And then prohibited on principal arterials, freeways, interstates, rush hour restricted locations, two-way streets with only 2 lanes of travel, where a streetery would result in a one-way vehicle circulation. So if you have a northbound and a southbound lane only, we would not allow a travel lane streetery there because it would basically result in a one-way road. That makes sense. On utilities, again, and then on streets that have curves or hills where sight distance becomes an issue as a driver. So that's up to the discretion of the engineer who's reviewing. And then for full road streeteries, which closes off maybe an entire road for a streetery, again, it has that 75% or more ground floor street frontage for commercial use requirement, but is prohibited in principal arterials, freeways and interstates, streets with emergency facilities like a police station or a fire station, WMATA bus routes or DC streetcar routes. So we do not want these affecting our bus infrastructure. I think something that's important here, a good example of this would be 18th Street in Adams Morgan. I know there's a lot of efforts to pedestrianize 18th Street, but we would not just approve a travel lane streetery there because it is a active bus route. So just something to food for thought. Utility vaults, and then same street curve issue. Something to also consider for this is that we must provide 20 feet for fire lane access on travel lane streeteries for full road closures. So we need to be able to continue to allow emergency vehicles to get through it at all times. I'm going to skip alleys, and we can come back to it as needed, just for sake of time. So now, how much can a business occupy of those available spaces? Businesses are only able to occupy the space in front of their food establishment. Right now, we're seeing very, very wide streeteries, and I think through this program, we'll see those become smaller. The food establishments are, however, able to extend in front of adjacent properties if that adjacent property owner provides a letter of consent saying that they support the expansion of the streetery in front of their building. But generally speaking, basically, streeteries on their own are allowed in front of the adjacent business. There are also buffers that businesses will need to abide by. These include 20 feet from intersections, 10 feet from crosswalks, 15 feet from bus stops, 22 feet from the main entrance of a residential building. That is to encourage and allow access to the front door for passenger pickup and drop off, and then also 10 feet from fire hydrants. These are general standards, and we recognize that not all streets are the same. Sometimes there are designs that maybe you could have some flexibility in these standards, whether it's like a one-way street or a really super wide street or some other issue. And so we do allow applicants who are seeking maybe waivers or exceptions to these standards to apply an appeal to the Public Space Committee for an exception. And I'll get through the permit process later on. Barriers are another standard. Basically, the type of barrier and the design of your streetery really depends on the roadway design and its functional classification. So DDOT has, as with any city, has a functional classification map that talks about, every road has a different classification, whether you're a local street or a collector or a minor arterial or a principal, and each of those go up and up and up in average daily trips and other design criteria. So depending on your classification and some other design criteria depends on the type of infrastructure you need. It could be jersey barriers or concrete blocks, which you see a lot of times next to protected bike lanes, or an approved railing. This gives a bit more context as to when each barrier type is needed. So type 1 arterials are those that are our heaviest car used roads. So like principal arterials, minor arterials with 4 and more travel lanes, those that are on our high injury network, our freight network, so used by heavy duty trucks, those maybe that are high crash risk locations. All of the streeteries on those roads need to be fully surrounded by jersey barriers. The other roadways, which are like what we're calling type 2 arterials, which are minor arterials that meet these conditions listed here, or our collector and local streets, have a jersey barrier on the vehicular approach end, and then basically approved like railings and these concrete blocks on the remaining sides. So what does that look like? These are just very conceptual designs. You'll see at the top here, type 1 arterials. Jersey barriers again all the way around the streetery. These would be placed a foot away from the travel lane, and then allow for like 6 inches at the curb so that stormwater can continue to flow. And then for type 2 arterials, collector and local streets, again, that Jersey barrier at the vehicle approach side, and then a mixture of approved railings and then concrete blocks on against the travel lane. So it really depends on where you're located. For overhead structures, you're going to see a significant change in what's in public space now in the future. This will include overhead structures that are between 8 to 13 feet in height, but these cannot obstruct visibility or line of sight to signals, signs, or other traffic control devices. So they'll need to be able to show that that's not happening in their submissions. The support structures that hold up the overhead roof cannot exceed 6 inches in width. And then they can't enclose the space at all above 42 inches where those barriers are. So they need to be open spaces, and that is to allow for greater visibility through these streeteries in our public space. And then all just general parameters about distances from crosswalks, intersections, and street trees. Platforms. Platforms are very important for the permanent program. They will be required. The temporary program did not require them. The temporary program was created in a time of haste and emergency, and this program is not. This program is shifting from that mentality and really seeking to create spaces that are lasting, as these will likely be in public space for some time. So these will require platforms that must be compliant with the American Disabilities Act. They need to be flush with the sidewalk with a maximum gap of a ½ inch. There needs to be at least a 3-foot clear entryway from a paved section of the sidewalk so that you can easily access the streetery. You're not having to climb through a tree box or over a bike rack, right? You need to be able to clearly enter the streetery space. Space underneath the platform surface, such as for manholes or utilities, must be accessible through movable planks or access panels. The utilities have to be identified, and these platforms cannot be bolted into the street or sidewalk. These are meant to be able to be moved should we need to repave, or should there be utility needs or other efforts. So we're trying to encourage and emphasize that while this is a permanent program, these still are temporary occupations of our public space. Drainage is also important. We've seen a lot of businesses not accommodate stormwater flow, so they need to be able to accommodate that. Seating capacity is also very important. So the general maximum seating capacity is the same as our sidewalk cafe program, which is 15 square feet per seat. So as a business, they'll measure out from their property. So if this was a food establishment, the yellow lines represent the property lines, and then they would be able to occupy the parking lane here, which for this specific example would be 6 feet by 20 feet for a standard streetery per our dimensions. So for this example, you would multiply 6 by 20. It's 120 square feet, divide by 15, and then that would allow 8 seats within that area. Of those 8 seats, at least one of the tables must be ADA accessible, and 5% of the seating must be ADA accessible as well. So same standards as our sidewalk cafe program. We see a lot of benches right now, like picnic tables or high tops in streeteries. So it's not to say that those won't be able to continue, but they will need to provide furniture that meets this requirement as well. Unpermitted uses, so they can't prepare food or alcohol. That means like no grilling, things like that. It's not to say they couldn't go out and make salsa at your table for your dinner. No generators, live music, televisions, or ropes, chains, or fencing that would prohibit people from accessing this space. They need to stay open to the sidewalk. Electrical conduits, happy to talk about that if you'd like. Heaters, same thing. Signage, they will need to provide signage that's accessible from the sidewalk that shows their name, their hours of operation, their seating capacity, and then the contact information for when we have access needs. So that has to be posted at all time. And then the permit process. So The temporary streetery program's permit process will expire once these guidelines are adopted, meaning that we will no longer be reviewing and approving temporary permits. The temporary permits that do exist now are being extended to July 31st of next year. So businesses will be able to continue to operate under their existing design until the end of July. And then at the end of July, they will need to either tear down their streetery or have obtained a new permit under this new process. So there are 2 new permits that we've created that will allow for streeteries. The first is called a streetery block permit, and the second is a streetery design permit. That streetery block permit are for those large-scale streeteries that we talked about. So alley streeteries, travel lane streeteries, or parking lane streeteries that are for multiple businesses. Those are applied for by bids or main streets. And that's when they submit like a curbside management and delivery plan. They reevaluate all those curbside uses that I talked about, and then they figure out how streeteries fit within those. Then the streetery design permit, the food establishment applies for, and every streetery needs a streetery design permit. And that's when you get into the nitty gritty of the design, the platform, the number of tables and chairs, the overhead structures, all of that. More specific details. So if you're just applying, if you're a business and you're just applying for the space in front of your business, you do not need to go through this streetery block permit process. You can go straight to the streetery design permit process. And if your design is consistent with these guidelines, we'll process you through an administrative path. If you're requesting a waiver from the standards, whether it's distance to a crosswalk or anything else, you'll then have to go to the Public Space Committee for approval. Or as part of the review process for a streetery, there's significant opposition or discussion. Every ANC is a reviewer on these streetery permits, so then that would trigger it up to a public space hearing. After that, then they get their building permits, electrical permits, update their certificate of occupancy, et cetera, and then they can operate. And the last point that I want to talk about is fees. I won't spend too much time on this, but we will be requiring a fee of $20 per square foot for restaurants who want to operate a streetery. Right now, for comparison, if you're curious, a South Sidewalk Cafe is either $5 per square foot if you're unenclosed, so if you don't have an enclosed space, or if you are enclosed, then it'd be $10 per square foot. So this is higher than that. But in line with our practice of charging for businesses to occupy public space, we view that this fee is a compromise and really represents the value of our public spaces, and is also meant to discourage vacant streeteries or underutilized streeteries, as we don't anticipate businesses will spend money to participate in this program if they're not going to use it. So there's various reasons why we're charging, but mostly it's recognizing the value of these highly utilized spaces along the curb. So that's it. I will pause for questions. Happy to dive into details. All of these guidelines are posted on our website, which is linked here at the top. I will also share this with your group after this meeting, and then you can always reach me by email or phone at the contact information shown here. Thank you.
So thank you, Kim. So I'll open it up for questions. I've got a few, but if you've got, so Lizzie says, great presentation. But I'll open it up for first for members, any questions for members, and then any questions from the general public. So members, first call. General public questions. Okay, I'll jump into mine. So I, in general, love streeteries. So I'm excited to see this get formalized. I do, so we have been embarking on our own kind of street space prioritization framework. And I want to share that with you because streeteries fit into that. This hasn't been ratified yet, but I think we've discussed it over the past 4 meetings, so I feel pretty good about the general state of it. But essentially, for any street, kind of, we think that in order to meet DDOT's goals of accessibility, reliability, and safety, the first and the first and the best and highest use of any street space is first and foremost wide connected sidewalks with curb cuts. Then the next important use is dedicated public transit lanes for emergency vehicles and public transit. Then ADA pickup and drop off for only disabled folks. Then protected bike lanes and scooter lanes to separate cars and pedestrians that are separated from cars and pedestrians and folks who use the sidewalk. Then bicycle infrastructure or bicycle and scooter parking is hardened daylight infrastructure. And that's actually coming back to the second point that I want to make. Then ADA parking, and then ADA accessible streeteries. So to that end, what I want to make sure of is that we're not, this, like once a streeter goes in, like it's unlikely in my general sense is it's like unlikely to leave like anytime soon. So what I definitely do not want to do under any circumstances is foreclose upon bus lanes on a particular street. And also opportunities to get bicyclists and scooters off the sidewalk with protected bike lanes. So I think kind of the way that I'm thinking about this is that no streeteries should exist on blocks that are slated in MAACDC as priority networks for either bicyclists or even more importantly, bus priority network. So if it's in the MAACDC element, if it's in the MAACDC bus priority network, and there's not already a bus lane on that street, then there should not be a streetery on it. And then similarly, if it's on the bike priority network, and there's not already a protected bike lane on that street, there shouldn't be a streetery on that street.
Yeah, I've actually received a similar comment recently, and having a sentiment of the same thought. And I think from DDOT's perspective, we agree. Streeteries are not the top priority of our curb space by any means. We view them as a benefit, as an asset to the district for all the reasons I discussed at the beginning of the presentation. But our infrastructure, our transit network, and how we move through our city comes first. So my goal as being our streetery coordinator, public space activation coordinator, is to make sure that we are as transparent as possible through every step of the permit process with applicants who are on those networks, that they are aware that in the future there will be a bus lane or a protected bike lane or whatever that asset is coming to that street. And I think we did not include a prohibition in these guidelines because we recognize that those projects take time, sometimes years. And so we didn't want to, impede a business from activating public space, from generating revenue, from also, creating a more vibrant space for people while those projects are maybe not even in the pipeline or may take years to develop. So from our perspective, when we receive permits on those streets, we'll be notifying those applicants, hey, you are on XYZ street for this infrastructure. Yep. When that project begins, we've been really successful in the past 2 years as we've started, planning new projects with streeteries in them, working with every business so that they understand what's coming. So they've been very integrated into our planning processes. So we work with them through that. Sometimes we have integrated streeteries into protected bike lanes. Look at 17th Street, look at 9th Street. Now, whether or not everyone agrees those are the best design, I think they were our first learning opportunities for what that looks like. So again, I think I didn't want to have an outright prohibition, but then we also will be conditioning that upon construction of those projects that, if it involves the removal, whether it be temporary or permanent, of those streeteries, that they will need to do that for those projects. So I think we are here to work with those businesses to integrate them in if possible, but if not, then it's not possible.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think just something explicit to say, like maybe even showing them, like if they're on a mobility priority network, like they need to actually sign something saying they know they're on a mobility priority network, and they know that their streetery could be removed.
Mhm. Sure, sure. We can definitely think about that. They will be signing a maintenance agreement that basically says that I understand that I am responsible, me being like the business owner, for maintaining this space, but also that DDOT can basically remove any streetery upon request. So we have the authority to remove streeteries as needed.
I mean, I'm saying this like I love streeteries, and there are ways that I think bus lanes can coexist with streeteries and bike lanes can coexist with streeteries. But what I don't want to have happen is basically that precluding like any streeteries get permitted, and that precludes future bus lanes and future bike lanes, because that is a better use of space than streeteries, so however much I love them.
Sure. Yeah. Point taken.
The other thing that I wanted to mention too, and other folks feel free to jump in, is we are also today, we've been kind of going back and forth on a, we've been going back and forth on a, nope. We've been going back and forth on a letter. So we passed a resolution back in June, calling on DDOT to create an action plan. Yeah, here's our language. Yeah, DDOT shall develop a comprehensive citywide action plan to bring all roadways into full compliance with DCMR, et cetera, and the DDOT DEM within 2 years. Specifically, we're focused on DDOT shall implement an action plan and achieve full compliance to all relevant locations within in the district by September 30th, 2026. What we're specific, and DDOT shall provide progress reports every 6 months to the MAC on the implementation of this action plan. What we're specifically referencing are daylighting issues. So the child was killed in New York because they failed to daylight, and we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that here. So a streetery should be held to at least the same standard as a parking space. So there should be absolutely no streeteries that violate anything related to sightlines in either the DEM or the DCMR as they relate to sightlines. So I mean, I think so. One, like the streeteries themselves shouldn't be violating sightlines. It's not parking in the law, but it should adhere to the standard that the law sets out for parking. And then two, I think we should use the opportunity to make sure that no streeteries are granted permits until that particular block is fully compliant with the law. So no, there is no parking that violates the DC code or the DEM. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's the other piece. So yeah, we'll hopefully ratify this letter. We've been going back and forth. This is going to be sent out to everyone. It's not related to streeteries, but it does relate to daylighting. So yeah, we'll send you a copy as well. We'll send it out to all the council members and kind of all the the folks that we think are relevant. But we'll also send you a copy just essentially to just make sure the streeteries are adhering to our kind of visibility. Visibility is super important to us because folks with disabilities, folks in wheelchairs are lower to the ground, so they're even more vulnerable. And then also anyone in a walker, in crutches, move slower. So like that's why visibility is even more important. So that's why kind of following the law is even more important. So I think, maybe we get a twofer here. It says like, first, it's making sure that we're not permitting any streeteries that mess with visibility. I love that you're already calling that out. That's great. but then also making sure that like, okay, this block at the very least, like no streetery can, like DDOT is certified, yes, this block is like clean with the law. So like this streetery will not go in until parking is like the signs are in the right place to indicate like there is no parking, there's no confusion about where parking can happen, because there are quite a few examples all around the city where like there are signs that indicate that people can park in places that are actually illegal to park. And even better, it would be great if there's hardened daylighting infrastructure that actually keeps people from, not just the signs being placed in the right place, but also even better, there's hardened daylighting infrastructure like bicycle parking or scooter parking that kind of solves a lot of the problems at once. But if there's a streetery, there should also be scooter and bicycle parking to get the scooters and bicycles off the sidewalks. So they're kind of clear shots for people who need to use the sidewalks.
Okay.
Cool. That's all I had, but I've just been talking for a while. Anything else from other folks? Any questions, comments from our friends at DDOT? Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kim. We're really excited. At least I'll just speak for myself. I'm really excited about seeing more like kind of official streeteries around the district. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And hope to see you all at the November special hearing.
Great.
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me.
Yep. Take care. Cool. So next, I dropped the in the chat, I dropped the agenda. So I'm going to share my screen again just so folks can see the agenda, and then we can flip over to we can flip over to yes, so this has been bouncing around a bunch. So thanks everybody for your comments. So Kelly gave comments, Lizzie gave comments, Naomi gave comments. So I think we're ready to go on this. So I just wanted to so kind of call for a vote on sending this letter. And I've also put in the chat, there's a link to the agenda, and then the agenda, there's a link to this letter. So I think I'll make a motion if there's no objection to ratifying this daylighting letter so it can get sent out. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Yes. Perfect. So that passes. Thank you, everybody. The next was ratifying these draft principles. I tried to go, and I don't want we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about today, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. But if we can pass this, that would be great. I tried to basically take our previous discussions and kind of distill it into something much tighter. So basically, it's draft principles. This is what we think should exist. This is what we think should exist in like kind of in order on any given street. So first, wide and connected sidewalks, then dedicated public transit lanes, then ADA PUDO zones, then protected bike lanes, then scooter parking, then ADA parking with 4-hour time limits, then ADA parklets and streeteries, ADA accessible parklets and streeteries, then tree boxes and green space, and then only general market price parking as the lowest priority. And kind of our general principles, we want to separate vulnerable users from motor vehicles, minimize conflicts, maximize visibility for all users, be open to major changes in street design, prioritize sidewalk accessibility and safety, minimize exceptions for individual circumstances, and then eliminate car delay as the primary consideration for street design. So I tried to kind of take our previous discussion and take folks' comments and kind of distill it down into something like pretty tight. There's a lot more that we can. We could add a ton of detail, but I think if we keep it short, that might make it kind of most clean. So kind of just general thoughts from Lizzie, Naomi, and then other folks as well.
I like it a lot. I think it's punchy and very clear and a great distillation of the conversation we've been having over the past few months. So I'm very supportive of it. Great job.
Awesome. Thank you. Naomi, any
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense and it's easy to understand and has some good ideas. So thank you.
Right, cool. So yes, I think if we're and so Kelly, I remember, was supportive as well. So I think we can go ahead and call for this vote. So I'll make a motion to approve these kind of draft principles and turn them into full principles for accessible transportation space usage. Is there a second?
Second.
Awesome.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hooray. I think I heard Naomi. Lizzie, are you good? Oh, shoot. I think Lizzie, are you there? Oh, dang. I think we may have lost Lizzie. Let me just double check.
She's still on the call.
I wonder if you can hear us. If you can just drop that in the chat, your vote in the chat.
I can text her also. I have her number.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Nice. Okay, so I think then we can move on until we get, and then we can come back and certify that these are our principles. Then, yes, capital projects plan. We've gotten some, or actually, I wonder if we can just let's stick with the agenda. So capital projects plan. So essentially, the one thing that we had asked Zach for, or kind of we had created a letter for, and Zach was helpful in getting us started.
Hey, sorry, I think I'm back.
Oh, hooray, cool.
I voted yes. Sorry.
Yeah, perfect, cool, thank you. Yeah, so we had asked to be consulted on all capital projects that DDOT does, and I think this gives us a nice framework for just to make sure that kind of our input is integrated into our work, or into DDOT's work. So from the last meeting of the MAC, one thing that we had asked, there's a little question about kind of how DDOT can best solicit our feedback. And the first thing that we had asked for was just a list of all the capital projects, or a simple spreadsheet that's just a list of all the capital projects with the cost or the budget, the stage, and a brief description. So Zach has been compiling that. So super appreciate the work, Zach. This is great. I think there's still some data missing for some of the projects on the cost. These definitely, in my mind, don't have to be exact numbers. The reason that I think cost, the reason for me at least that I think cost is a good it's a kind of a good proxy for how much DDOT is prioritizing the project, and then also how big it's going to be. So like in my mind, like we should probably focus on the biggest first. There may be kind of other considerations. So I definitely don't want to. I'm definitely not proposing that to be a hard and fast rule. But I think if we can get the rest of, just like, and then this is to Zach actually after saying thank you for this. But if we can just kind of get rough estimates as to kind of the order of magnitude, is this like a $100,000 project, $1 million project, or $100 million project, that type of order of magnitude, I think that would be super helpful. Does that like, Zach, how does that sound?
I think it depends on where the project is in like the conceptual or design phase. Like if it's a concept, we don't necessarily have a sort of final cost, because like the bus priority projects, for example, all come out of a larger pot of money.
Yep.
So I can't give an estimated cost for some of these.
Yeah. So I mean, what if maybe then if it's out of a larger pot, can you just say, hey, this is the pot size?
Yeah, I can say that for you. Yeah,
I think that's kind of a good. And then once we get, like, I think then we can start maybe at the next meeting, we could actually take a look at the list and then kind of start thinking about kind of the best way to start providing feedback to DDOT on some of these. Obviously, we're not gonna be able to go in super detail in all of them, but I think there's with the draft principles, at least I think we can kind of make a start. If that was a hand, you can just go ahead and I can't see the screen, so go ahead and just jump in if you've got a hand up.
Hi, yes. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. This is Lakeisha Love Pettis, the Chief Equity and Transportation Officer for DDOT. Zach and I was talking about what it is that you were actually looking for. So I don't know if you recall, you have a copy of the director's presentation where she presented the priorities, and she identified the capital improvement plan. So we actually have for the next 3 years a $608 million project improvement plan, and it lists the big bucket items, and then they actually are grouped so that you know the amounts attributed to them, and that also speaks to the same numbers that we're providing to Federal Highway. So that will give you a big, broader scope that you're looking for, and it's really like a one slider, and it's in that, and Zach can send it over to you if you don't have it. And then the detail that we have. So basically, what he provided to you is information from our state transportation improvement plan, which also is the local projects as well as our federal capital portfolio combined. And so they are all within our the OCFO websites, our DDOT websites, which he shared all of those information with you as well. And then the only other thing we have, if you want to take an even further deep dive, every year our agency has to provide a plan of contracts. These are plans for any contracts or that are over $1 million that has to be approved by council. You know, so just want to get a clarity on what it is that you're looking for, because there are so many different data points that we have, and we, so we wanted to make sure we're providing you with the best, most reasonable information. And these are things that we have annually: the plan of contracts, I have an obligation plan, but then of course you have they all feed back into the director's priorities for FY 25 through 27.
Yeah, so basically the kind of the general principle here is that we want to make sure that we're involved in or we have visibility in what big projects are either in design right now or under construction or that are either being planned or being executed right now, and making sure that like our voice is heard on particular projects, especially the biggest ones. So there are a lot, which is great. DC is doing a lot of stuff, but we just want to make sure that our voice is being heard, to make sure that it's aligned with what we think is accessible and fair. So if
I do have
that's
one other. I have one other suggestion to that point, which I'm thinking just came to mind. So one of the other branches under my purview is also our civil rights branch, where we actually receive the estimates from the engineers, because our division has also set goals for disadvantaged businesses, but that includes all of the estimates for the project.
okay.
Generally, so I'm thinking what we probably could do if we could prepare and show what we've had received on a monthly basis, if that helps too. So, and if there's any feedback, certainly it will allow for time for you all to review the estimates that we've received and provide some, provide direct feedback to our team to give to the project engineer.
Yeah, so the only thing that so that's super great. The only thing that I'm hesitant about is that, like, we want to make sure that we're not only getting consulted at whatever it is, 30 or 65% design. It's like really, like, because, by that time, like, a lot of the major design decisions have already been made. So we want to make sure that we're getting in early, especially. So, like, for example, if they're gonna,
It's like 15% design. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just actually had our executive leadership retreat, and one of the areas that we talked about was the handoffs, and we are taking the RACI process. We're going to really start identifying and identifying the workflow. And one of the things that I've mentioned that I wanted to make sure of, that similar to what you're saying, our ADA coordinator and our equity team is at the table just for situational awareness. And so that would have us at the design phase so that we're part of the conversations at the beginning. And so what we can do is actually send information out just for you all, this is for situational awareness. So maybe you can review the ADA concept. And then we can create these sessions where we may have a part of these meetings to be like a work and review session, and then you can let us know, what works best for you, and we can refine it as we go on.
Yeah. That sounds great. I mean, I think, like, just so this list, I think, is great. Like, I just want to make sure that this list captures, like, basically everything that's like everything big that's going on, and it seems like it does. And I really appreciate, Zach, your work to get it to the state. So it's really just and these numbers, I think I mentioned, like, they don't have to be exact. Even if it's like the difference between 5 million and 7 million doesn't really matter. Obviously it's a lot of money, but it's just like, just to get, like, we just want to know the difference between, or at least for me, I'll just speak for myself, and I'll let Lizzie and Naomi talk more if they've got other opinions. Is just like, we want to, like, if there's a $200 million project or an $80 million project, that's much different from a $1 million project. And that's just, like, kind of order of magnitude, like, how big is this thing? That's the type of, like, so we want to make it, like, for me especially, like, okay, like, we're going to spend $200 million on this project. I definitely want to make sure that, like, our voice is heard on that. If we've got a smaller project, maybe that's less priority, unless a particular member, like, thinks it's a big deal, in which case we can do a deep dive on it.
Okay. Yeah, so we can, one of the documents that I shared today, which, like I mentioned, was the plan of contracts. And then there's our 6-year plan. So we could actually provide, because what I'm hearing is that you want to see it at the design phase, and you want to see it conceptually if there's an amount associated to that. So that's the section at the bottom that, from my experience, and I've been in the government for 25 years, all with the CFO and then DDOT, but all for DDOT before they became an agency. So I totally understand. And so conceptually, sometimes it's really just an idea, and then they don't have an amount associated to it until it starts really to be refined into the design phase. And it's after a lot of public engagement and involvement. So that's kind of those ones that we can't have a number for right now, is where they are right at this moment. But we certainly can work to get, if we have a threshold of the target amount, let's say if it's $20 million project, that's just as a base, then that's where we're going to make sure that we get you the information for those at the design or at the moment the conception, the concept is, codified to an amount. So we can prioritize it just, like that, and maybe go from that angle, because we don't have too many high projects, over 200,000 besides the two that you listed. And, that's because of a lot of this is the bipartisan infrastructure funding.
Yeah, for sure. So, maybe if we can just take our best shot, if it can't be split out, like maybe if you can just say this can't be split out, but here's the pot, the size of the entire pot, or it's part of this pot. I think that would be great. Does that work?
Yeah, Zach, he'll get that. He already said he'll get that for you. So I apologize.
Oh, no, that's great. No, super appreciate it. Lakeisha, this is great. Cool. Any and I think yes, and then we can pick it up. We can pick this up next meeting, and just kind of start looking at the list and see if there's like another way that we can kind of prioritize. There's also, so I want to lift up Lizzie's suggestion of kind of looking at it kind of through an equity lens. Maybe we add some additional emphasis on Ward 7 and 8, or 5, 7, and 8, and then also we can also think about inviting people from 5, 7, and 8, specifically folks with disabilities in those areas, to our particular meetings that we want to talk about those particular projects. So yeah, I think that's a good way to. I'll just throw that out there as a kind of a way to put an equity, kind of a further equity lens on this, on the review. Cool. So this is, I think that's it, and then we can kind of do a deeper dive on tackling capital projects next month, if that works for folks.
Works for me.
Perfect. Nice. Okay. So then we've got Zach, can you explain the scooter, the micromobility fleet comments, or the kind of permit application, and then talk about what is due on October 15th?
Sure. Let me pull it up here. Sorry, I haven't really gone through it.
Oh, I haven't either, unfortunately.
But essentially, I mean, it's when the shared fleet team develop the sort of requirements to receive a permit to operate a dockless mobility device within the public right-of-way. And so what they're requesting is that the public and any other stakeholders sort of review what those requirements would be and provide comments to them by the 15th.
Yeah. A few things that come to mind that we've actually had a long time ago, maybe a year ago, we had Aaron Goldbeck from DDOT, who manages the program, come and present. And I remember there are a few things that we wanted to bring up for this next cycle, and those were ensuring that scooters can't, if they're detected on a sidewalk, they can't go fast. They can't exceed a certain threshold. I don't know what that number should be. Maybe I'll just say 4 miles an hour or 5 miles an hour or something. That was one. And then two, that there should be the ability for scooters to be geofenced into and be parked. If they can't be left on the sidewalk, they actually have to be left at a scooter corral if there's a scooter corral on that block. I know that technology exists because I saw that in Phoenix. Like it is there, where it's like you cannot lock this. If there's a scooter corral on the street, you can't park this like willy-nilly anywhere. Like you actually have to go to the scooter corral. So those are the two things that I remember from that previous discussion that I wanted to kind of bring up this round. Are there other things that folks one, I wanted to see what folks thought about those two things, and then two, if there were other things that folks thought we should just make sure about the scooter program. If someone's getting a permit, their devices need to adhere to these regulations.
What exactly is a scooter corral?
Yeah, scooter corrals basically it's just like it takes the place of a parking spot where it's just where like instead of a car being parked there, there's scooters and bikes that are parked there. Basically, the reason that I like them is that and especially if it's mandated, it forces the scooters to be parked not on the street rather than on the sidewalk.
Okay. I'm trying to look one up to see what it looks like.
It's like basically just like imagine like a bike rack on the street instead of the sidewalk.
I see. I'm looking at one right now. Okay.
And this,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, I mean, as we all know, just the parking on the sidewalks is such a big problem. So hopefully there'll be some sort of system, like the ones you're suggesting, because there's no reason for them to be in the middle of the sidewalk, like what happens all too often.
And feel free, if you've got your hand up, just go ahead and yeah, go for it.
Yeah, definitely agree. I will always stop and move scooters, and they're everywhere on the sidewalks. I also am wondering what kind of mechanisms there are to ensure that there's like a very direct line of community feedback if there is some sort of issue, to ensure that the operators have to remedy the issue, or else I don't know. I've heard in testimonies offered, I think Heidi highlighted this in a couple of years of DDOT performance oversight hearing testimonies, how, you know, there'd be 311 requests that would be submitted and they went into a black hole, and there wasn't a great kind of way to hold the companies accountable when they didn't follow through with, you know, we need to enforce things within a certain amount of time, or we need to do, you know, make sure that they're meeting their service level agreements to the department. And so I'm wondering if there are ways to, I don't want to say put teeth in it, but just ensure that if they do not uphold their end of the bargain, whether it is, you know, resolving requests, getting, you know, being responsive to community concerns, et cetera, that there are some sort of consequences or ramifications for not upholding that end of the bargain, and making sure that there are very clear lines and very clear paths of communication for people to report certain enforcement issues or other places where the companies are not kind of following through in this way.
Yeah, I was going to say something about that because I know I was supposed to. I drafted up some of the things that we were talking about that we wanted to be dealt with enforcement. And of course, the only things that I've really thought about on my end are the scooters and the bikes, and lately the mopeds. Because like I said, I had a friend, he's in a wheelchair, and some guy while I was walking by him, he said, yeah, some guy just ran into me with a moped. Like I've seen them come straight off the street, like going as fast as a car and then get right on the sidewalk and just keep going. And so that was another issue that I've seen like really lately, like when the pandemic first stopped, you know, that's when I started seeing more of the scooters. Like the last several months, I've been seeing more of the mopeds where they're like driving through the streets and getting right on the sidewalk. So I drafted, like, I remember you said to talk, like, sort of put things in bullet points where we want to have enforcement. So I talked about the scooters. I wrote up a little document, you know, an email where like I just sort of said scooters, mopeds, any kind of electronic devices, them being parked, like those are the kinds that I like law enforcement to get involved with. But I couldn't think of any other things that we've talked about. We're like, well, where could we say that the DC Council and mayor needs to make some sort of rules to enforce these laws so, you know, people get punished or something to sort of make people fear to say, okay, well, I shouldn't do this, and there's going to be consequences if I violate these statutes or laws.
Hey, this is Lizzie. I actually have a question for Zach and Lakeisha while we have them. About a year ago, I'll just say, like, in my neighborhood, we sort of had this epidemic of Lyft or, you know, like other rentable scooters and e-bikes just started like proliferating in the sidewalk. And I actually contacted the dockless mobility, or I think it's like the micro mobility team of DDOT, and they were so responsive. I mean, like within hours, I got a very personalized response from them. They asked for specific feedback on like designated areas. And I mean, whatever they did was extremely effective. I mean, I had no issues for many, many months beyond that. So I guess the question is, would it be helpful for us to maybe engage with that team on this subject? Or can you help us understand how you're connecting in with the dockless mobility, micromobility team, and help us understand sort of the picture on the DDOT side? And sorry if everyone else is like up to speed on the relationship, but you know, I'm curious on it.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely invite the team to the MAC to present. In terms of internally, I mean, we stay pretty close in contact with that active transportation branch. So good to hear that they were responsive to your phone call and your request to remove those scooters. I will say that they try to respond to complaints within about 2 hours, I think is their sort of standard operating agreement with the operators. I will say that in the past, they've said that their sort of punitive measures are limited in what they can do, but they will mark an operator out of compliance if there is an issue that hasn't been resolved within that time frame. So either using 301, calling DDOT directly, or there should be a number on the device to call to make sure that it's within compliance or is not presenting a barrier in the sidewalk. But yes, we can definitely have them come to the MAC.
Cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like Aaron Goldbeck is the person who is yeah, he was great. Oh, let me just let me just shift to so I'm going so yeah, I want to make sure that Naomi has some time to bring up an issue that she wanted to talk through. I'm going to shift I'll draft a letter and I'll circulate it to everyone. If people can take a look and make comments and add whatever you want, and hopefully we can get that out. I know it's quick turnaround, but by the 15th, that would be great. But I want to give Naomi the floor to talk through an issue that she wanted, that she had.
Yes, thank you. Sorry to put that in the chat. I just wanted some time-sensitive advice here, and I think what I went through will be of interest in a bad way to the group. So basically, I went to an event Saturday night in Baltimore, and I needed to come back the same night, so I booked the Amtrak, and the Amtrak got delayed significantly. There was some sort of personnel problem, and we stopped on the track in New Carrollton for 45 minutes. From about 12:30 a.m. to 1:15. Everyone got off the train except me because I couldn't. And basically, they were like, the crew ran out of time and they had to wait for a new crew. And I had no idea how long that would take. So I called Royal Cab and Yellow Cab Company because both of them are supposed to have wheelchair accessible vehicles. And their websites say 24/7, or the DC OHR website that details information about wheelchair accessible taxis says it's supposed to be 24/7. And both companies said they don't have wheelchair cars at night. And not even just that night. They made it seem like any night. It's just not something they offer, which is clearly different than what the website says. So eventually a new crew for the Amtrak team, and I got back to Union Station, and it was 1:30 in the morning, so the metro train wasn't running. The bus, it would have been 2 buses. It would have taken a very long time. So pretty much my only option was walking or rolling in my chair home at 1:30 in the morning, alone. Um, I had a friend on the phone with me, but I was alone in the dark in the middle of the night. And it's just really, really awful that I had to go through this because of the taxi companies. So I want to file complaints and do whatever I can do. And I'm wondering what advice you all might have on that. I've never really filed an official complaint like that.
I think you should document. And so, like, at least for me, like, I think you should totally document this, like, write up your experience. And I'd be very happy to, like, we should, like, this is transportation in DC. Like, New Carrollton, I think, is harder because it's not in DC, but Union Station, especially if this is if this is in DC, like, I'd be very happy, like, let's write a letter, like, from the MAC saying, like, this is a kind of a thing that really matters, and we need to say something and put a stake in the sand and say this shouldn't happen.
You can also go to the Justice Department. They have a complaint program where they deal with issues related to violations of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I deal with employment discrimination cases, but I think it's a whole nother sector where they deal with, like, sort of public discrimination, disability discrimination. So you could contact the Department of Justice Disability Rights section, and they would probably better give you a lot of guidance about how to deal with the issue. Because Yellow Cab is a national company, so they may fall within their purview. They have a lot of different, when it comes to the federal government, it's a lot of funny things about what they can and cannot cover, what they can and cannot step in and out of. But I would at least contact them and the disability rights section and see what advice and things they could offer you to sort of try to help you figure out how to resolve something like that.
Yeah, I talked to Kelly about it, Kelly Matthew, put in attend tonight. And she said she filed a complaint about the exact same thing against the exact same taxi companies 2 years ago without any sort of progress or resolution.
I think then we should add that too. Like, and also Heidi Case, who was the previous chair of the MAC, is now there's an accessibility group similar to, like, ours, but it's specifically for DHHB, and we've talked about kind of joining up on things. And I think I would love to join up on this. Like, so, but I think step one is actually writing it down and just documenting, hey, like, this is what happened. It's like a statement of facts. And it seems like it's like an ongoing issue, is, Kelly, also. So yeah, let's do you want to like write it down, draft a letter, and then we can circulate it. And I'm sure Heidi can bring it up at the accessibility committee for DFHB, Department for Hire Vehicles too. Yeah, let's.
Can I also chime in, because I mean, this strikes me for on one hand, there is a equity issue, right, around, like, people with disabilities should be able to move around at 1:30 a.m., for social reasons or for other, just life. But it's also, there are emergency preparedness elements of this too, right? As well as and not just from, like, a health emergency standpoint, right? Because we're not talking about ambulances.
Totally.
Like, people have emergencies, they have emergent issues. And what Naomi is highlighting is a pretty considerable and concerning gap in options, during critical hours, right? Like, those are hours when you can't get a hold of friends and family to help you out, where, individuals with disabilities really rely on public transportation infrastructure or commercial options. So I think that's a helpful framing, right? There's, like, a dignity and equity aspect of this, but then there's a safety element to it too.
Right. Yes. And, like, in the experience that I had, I could have been hurt. I was a young woman alone in the middle of the night because the taxi companies wouldn't help me,
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of different public safety components. I did already write a letter, and Kelly has looked at it, and I can send it to the rest of you as well.
Yeah, and if you, I mean, I'd be very happy to, like, we can send this on behalf of the MAC, saying like, okay, this is wrong, and we can also send it directly to all of the, not just DFHV, but also to the companies themselves. And
Right.
yeah, totally, let's do it.
Yeah, and I'm planning on filing a complaint that someone just sent the link in the chat, but that's already on my radar thanks to Kelly.
Yeah,
Okay.
who does she file her complaint with? Because I'm looking at the statute and it is like it's part of the Americans with Disabilities Act and it's part of Title III. So that covers businesses and nonprofits open to the public. And so they would be a private entity, so they would fall within their purview. But the thing about a lot of these big groups like the DOJ and people like that is you have to stay on top of them because the government, so they got like a bazillion cases and people contact them, so you have to worry them. And then not only that, they pick and choose which cases are like, oh, well, this is a good case, this is a bad case, and this kind of falls within our agenda, this doesn't fall within our agenda. So like contacting them once and not, I mean, I don't know if she contacted them once or multiple times, but sometimes, especially like with the office like that, like they're the litigation for the United States. So sometimes you have to really bug them. So you can't just like send them one email and say they probably might forget it. Like you have to say, worry them or say, make it an issue to them. So they're like, okay, you're bugging us to death, so we'll go pay attention to you. Because I've worked in offices and it's been like that with certain issues that we've dealt with, or we had one issue that was important to a certain group of people. I won't get into the details, but they got connected to some nonprofit and all these different attorneys, and they were like contacting the office I was working in like nonstop all the time. They're like, okay, we got to do something about this. And sometimes that's just how you have to do it. Cause again, these are huge gargantuan entities. And if you don't make noise, they're not going to pay attention to you.
Well, her complaint's an active investigation, and she's also been working with the American University Disability Law Clinic. So it's not like there hasn't been progress; it's just been taking forever. But
Okay.
it is under investigation properly.
Okay.
Okay, this is Susie. I'm sorry to interrupt. I put a link in the chat. You can go to ohr.dc.gov and file a complaint with them, as well as you will find a link there to file with the DFHV, Department of For Hire Vehicle.
Right. Yes, I'm already in the process of writing that. It's on my radar, but thank you.
And Ashton raised a point too about Amtrak itself, so Amtrak can be a recipient of the letter too.
Yeah. And Kelly also sent me the complaint form for Amtrak. Yeah, I mean, I was on the train for 45 minutes, no staff at all, paying for a solid half hour. So I thought I was completely alone. I mean, I had my friend with me, but like I didn't think there was any staff. And eventually they came over and brought me like food and water. But I mean, we literally called 911 at one point because we had been alone without any staff for a half hour.
Amtrak has a lot of litigation against them, but regarding them violating the ADA, so that it's not. I take the Amtrak. They don't. Again, it's one of those federal entities where if you don't bug them or sort of put yourself out there, they don't pay attention. Like
Right.
the DOJ has had litigation against Amtrak before. They've actually had like class action lawsuits for some of the stuff that the Amtrak people were doing. And Amtrak is has some federal operation, so it's not it's a quasi-private entity, so it's part federal and part private. So, but it does fall within federal funding, so that's one reason why the DOJ was able to go after them.
Yeah, well, thank you all for listening to this, and I'll send you soon what I've written. Kelly also sent me a bunch of email addresses of people who might also be good recipients of this letter. But yeah, I mean, the taxi companies and Amtrak, I am a little more concerned with the taxi companies because Amtrak, it has delays. It's not unheard of. But if the taxi companies say they're 24/7, they need to actually be 24/7 for everyone.
Totally. If you can also, if you want, like if you can draft it on behalf of MAC too, and then we can send it like as a MAC, like, hey, this is we're saying it's not just you, Naomi. It's like it's the MAC. We're saying this together.
Awesome. I'll send you what I have soon.
Okay, cool.
Thank
And
you.
what about Uber and people like that? Do they have what is their like sort of policy on
Yeah.
wheelchair accessible vehicles?
They also don't have them at night. I've talked to every
Okay.
single driver pretty much because I can sometimes get them during the day. But as the drivers have told me, basically, in order to increase the number of wheelchair accessible vehicles, I think they outsource to a private company and they have to go back to the company's storage warehouse or whatever it's called by like 11 or 12 at night. So I don't really know why they think disabled people have a curfew. Um, but especially as like an adult, it would be nice and fair for me to be able to get Ubers and taxis whenever.
Totally.
Yeah, because you could probably like if you're, I mean, in a lot of ways, Uber's kind of taking over the taxi game, so it might be uh sort of good to bring them sort of in the loop too, like Uber and Lyft and all those kind of different people,
Right.
because it's kind of like go ahead and bring all of them in at one time instead of going after them separate, because it's kind of the same issue.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, so circulate this thing and then we can get it out. Let's get it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're a little bit over time, but kind of last call, anything else? Folks, let's wrap up for today. So we'll conclude our October 2024 Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council. We will reconvene on the second Wednesday of November, MAACDC.link/meeting. We will see you all then. Thanks so much for a great meeting.
I did have one quick question. Like, do you mind? I want to piggyback off of that one question I had about the enforcement regulations. Like,
yeah,
exactly what you want me to try to do for you.
Yeah. So basically, just kind of like the draft principles for street prioritization, street safety prioritization, or street space prioritization. Maybe make a draft principles for enforcement. So basically, like these are the worst things that we want to stop happening. Like we want. It's so for example, it's worse for a moped to be on the sidewalk. A moped should never be on the sidewalk.
Gotcha.
Then okay, we don't want like ideally we don't want like e-bikes on the sidewalks going full speed or whatever, or we don't want anyone going over whatever 5 miles an hour on the sidewalk, or just basically just like kind of detail out like, hey, these are the things that we want to prevent.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, I sort of wrote that out already, and I thought that everybody else was going to sort of try to come in and chime in about other things, but I don't think anybody remembered.
Did you send those out already?
No. I don't even know what the email address. No, I had just drafted the ones that I thought of. And then I thought everybody else was supposed to sort of come up with any ideas, and then they were supposed to tell me. I was gonna kind of put those in, and then I could work on drafting everything.
Oh, let me put it on. We'll put it on the agenda for next week. If you can just send me what you have, or not next week, next month. If you can send me what you have, we can start talking about and we can kind of start thinking about enforcement together.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Cool. Awesome.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Adrian.
Take care.